At the right time, 11 p.m. Central European time. We are doing Sunday and Mike's, and oh, it's so good to be here again with you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Want to thank you, Scott, always as being here first and setting the pace for things. It always makes me happy to see you here, man. Good to see you. Good to see everybody that's going to show up here in the live stream tonight. Whether you're going to watch this live or in the rerun, I want to let you know that your time is a very important thing to me, and the fact that you could spend a little bit of it with me is always going to be greatly appreciated. So thank you, sir, so much. A lot to talk about tonight. These live streams are getting longer and longer. I always try to keep them down to an hour, but somehow or another, they're just creeping up there and getting longer and longer. But that's okay. The success of them and the fact that more and more people are tuning in every week. I'm surprised by the numbers. They were low and now they're just getting up there. So must be doing something right here. Hey, Mr. Watson, how you doing? Good to see you. Good to see you. Yeah, while we wait for more folks to show up here in the live stream, I shall ramble on as I usually do. Let me check here and make sure that the picture is good. Yeah, I like that. That works. Ben, how you doing? Welcome, sir. Welcome to the live stream. Welcome, guys. Yeah, I have been going through the. Hello, Mike. I'm currently editing a video that I'm trying to keep under 2 hours. Yeah, it's tough. You have to learn how to self-edit yourself, and that's one of the toughest things. That's just tough. Um, we have been having an interesting week here. We got the shipment in. I went through them all. I went through all those guitars. Uh, you know, just really great examples of 70s guitars. I'm always talking about how great they are, and tonight we're going to talk a lot about vintage guitars in general. We're going to talk about tonight. A couple of issues. And just really pleased to have such a fine group of 70s Grecos in. It's great to have Strats and Les Pauls and a custom Les Paul and a standard. That's really like the trifecta. And you can really see for yourself instead of reading about it on some forum or out of a dusky, guitar player magazine. You can actually hold it in your hands and see it for yourself, or come here and see it on the live stream and how we talk about it. Now, I'd like to show you guys this. I bet you don't recognize it. This is the guitar that I have decided to keep for myself. And I have done a fret leveling and a polish on it, and made all the adjustments really necessary to it to get it, up and playing. Really wonderful. I got to intonate it really well. Did a setup on it, and it's just really just a terrific sounding guitar. Now, couple of things. I would play it for you actually, but there's a short. All pickups are working, but there's a short here in the middle in the bridge position. The neck position works fine, but there's a short in there. Instead of me tackling it, which I could, I've decided that I'm going to have Fern take a look at it because, he's a pro. And I want to put in. I'm not going to make any changes to this. Hopefully, the short is just do a little contact spray and it'll be good to go. I'm not going to make any changes to the internals. I'm not going to make any changes to the pickups. One thing I am going to do, which is a reversible mod that you can do, is I am going to put a treble bleed in here that I have here. So when I get a chance, I'm going to get this down to Fern and have him do that. But I wanted to show you the back. And if you remember, one of the big problems was there was a lot of divots in there. There was a lot of dents and divots. If you can see that, which I think you can see that those are all been filled in. So I did drop fills on. There was a couple up and down the neck. The major ones are here and here and over here. But I did drop fills on that and sanded it down, went through that procedure. And now, when you do drop fills, you're still going to see where those divots were. However, what it will do is just make them smooth as, as a baby's bottom. You can just run your finger over that and it's not even there. And it turned out really nice. So I was able to do that. Let me catch up here in the chat. Tommy Washington, hey, how you doing? I liked and subscribed. Thank you, Tommy Washington. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Jupiter, Dave Chappelle, yeah, Jupiter. Mr. Larson in the house. How you doing? Mike, I saw a 1982 Super Real Mint Greco in Holland for 1850 on Reverb at a guitar shop. Yeah, it's probably one of the ones that I sold to the shop. Good to see you, by the way, Mike. Yeah, I really like this one. I like this one. It's it's a keeper. I actually once I did a little bit, and it didn't need very much work at all. Actually, I still don't understand why they basically sold this as junk to me, because it's far from it. The neck is straight. The frets, it's had a refret, and we're going to talk about that in a minute on it. But the electronics are basically solid. They need a little touching up. Not an issue wrong with this guitar. Just needed a little TLC, a little cleaning up, which I did. Not too much. There's a divot. Where is it at? Let me see if I can find. Yeah, there's a divot right here. If you can see, that's in the wood. I could have done a spot fill on that as well, but I decided against that because, as I said, you want to kind of edit the amount. There's a good one. I like that one, Scott. You have to edit the amount of work that you do on these when you're restoring them. Some of you leave, because you want to give it you want to leave a certain amount of the patina to it. So you got to know where to do it and where not to. So this was a good example, but I did everything that I thought was appropriate, and it turned out fantastic. It's heavy. I weighed it. This guitar is 9 pounds and 6 ounces. It's it's not light, but that's very typical of 70s Strats. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Some people think that the reason 70s Strats were heavy was because I heard that Spalding, the baseball bat company, had a big surplus of wood that the Fender accountant saw as a good buy back in '74, and that's why for about 5 years from that point, you had nothing but heavy wood guitars. He basically bought out a bunch of baseball bat, which is a different kind of ash. It's southern ash. It's not swamp ash. These are made out of Japanese ash, sin ash, and very similar actually to not swamp ash. It's a little harder. It's actually more closer to the white ash that they started using at that time. Still a maple neck. After cleaning this guitar, it's a 4-piece neck, maple neck. You can see, I don't know if you guys can see that, but you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces that make up this neck. When you read in the Japanese catalog for oh, by the way, bringing that up. So I was curious. I remember I thought that somebody had swapped the tuners on this guitar. I said, well, those aren't the Greco tuners that I'm used to seeing. And obviously I've seen a few at this point. That's weird. But when I went to go clean this guitar up, I noticed that there was no stripping, nothing underneath these that would indicate that these were anything other than the original tuners. So that led me to start to think another moment where I had to say, that's interesting. So I went back to my Greco catalogs and I went back a year to 1974. And as it turns out, this is not a 1975 Greco SE 600. This is a 1974 Greco SE 600. This is a 74. This is and by the way, I've got my 1969. This is a Ace strap from 1969. This is a real vintage strap. I thought I would put it on this 74 guitar. This is what your strap in your guitar would look like if you were around in 74 gigging. But I thought I would put these two together because they're both vintage. But yeah, this is actually not a 75. This is early. This is the earliest Greco that I've ever had. Yeah, it's 9 pounds, 6 ounces, but you know what? I've gotten past that. I haven't been able to put this guitar down since I got it in. And I think that leads to what we're going to talk about. Well, it's a couple of things we're going to talk about a few things tonight. But if you can see here on the edge, I want to zoom in on that. That you can see there where there has been a refret done. That's what a refret will look like on one of these old guitars because they had to strip it down, take the old frets out, level the fretboard, and then put the new frets in. So this has had a refret. And now when you have a vintage guitar that's had a refret, typically it's then classified as a player's grade guitar, vintage model. It's player's grade. That's the term that you'll find in the professional shops. Let me catch up here. There seems to be a lot going on here in the chats. I thought it might be one of the ones you imported. Yeah, it probably is. That's good to know. They're marking them up. Once I sell them at a fair price. Once they get them, they can put them up to whatever they want. I love those straps. Michael Watson says, "Thank you, man." Yeah, this one's got a weird story. I sold it to a guy in New York because I said, you know what, I don't need this thing, and it didn't make it to him for some reason because of post NL. I refunded him, and then it took. I thought it was gone forever. I actually thought it was lost. And about 6 weeks later, it showed back up here again. And I decided that's just a sign. And it's good because I've got it here to put on here. But they're creeping up in price. It's funny. I kid you not. I paid more for this strap than I paid for this guitar. And that is not an exaggeration. That is not an exaggeration. That's funny. This is, and I want to talk about that too. I want to talk about the cost of things. 70 guitars weigh high quality in the 70s wisdom of those days. That's actually error correct. Yeah, it's error correct now. Yeah. That's quite true, guys, because back then, again, like I said, either that happened with the baseball bat theory, or there's a theory by a lot of luthiers that a lot of that wood that was being used for those mid to late 70s Fender Strats and other guitars was not cured wood. It was still wet. And then they put a poly finish on top of that, and that basically locked in that weight, that water weight in it. And it's not going to leak out. It's not going to drain out. So that's another theory. And then, of course, they made them that way on purpose because a lot of guitar players at that time thought that weight equals heavy sustain. And having been around at that time, at least getting a more of awareness by the time I was 13, 14 years old and started hanging around with my friend Drake and his friends. And hearing that back in the late 70s, early 80s, I can say that that's the one that I subscribe to the most. However, I will have to say that the Luther's theory about the woods not being properly cured, I think that holds a lot of weight as well. The Spalding baseball bat, wood sale, that one, no, I don't know. I'm not so sure about that one. Those are the three theories that you hear about 70s guitars. Now, and then some guys will just say, well, men were men back then. They could handle the weight. You guys are a bunch of sissies now with your 6-pound Les Pauls and your 2-pound Strats. So there's that as well. Do I think this guitar brings this is good? One of the things that why I know that this was a well-loved guitar, well taken care of, well played, and I knew it was going to be a great guitar. By the way, the neck pickup is just beauty, but it does ring. It has a nice acoustic ring to it. It sounds it sounds like a 70s Strat, if you know what I mean. Frets are consumable. Yeah. Scott says, I would rather have properly cured wood, not a soggy log. Good one. We have to give it to Scott tonight for the first good joke of the night. You strike me as a famous YouTuber, but you got a lot more riddle for you. What is the one thing that you cannot have for breakfast? A clue. There are two correct answers. Well, you can't have lunch or dinner for breakfast. That's the first thing that you can't do. Hi from Dubai. Um, Frets, refrets. So, honestly speaking, um, that process of doing that removal of taking out the old, breaking that basically that side seal, and then having to level that maybe. And by the way, I'm not going to say it's all butter with this thing. There is one criticism I have, and it's for these 70s strats in general that have this flat radius to it. It's a very flat, very D-shaped flat, very D-shaped neck on that. And what can happen is you can get some your high E string can fret off, especially up here. When you get down here past the 12th fret, not a big deal. But up here, you got to be careful. That's something that happens because it doesn't have that radius, the curve radius to it. It's flat. It's not a curve radius to it. So you'll get a lot more falling off. Sometimes it could be your nut, but generally on a flat radius like this is generally that. So you do have to adjust your playing style a little bit for that. But that's a small criticism, to be honest with you. It's not a big thing for me. But one of the reasons that you want or not want to, but eventually will happen if you play like the guy who owned this guitar back, Bob. I'm sure because it's original case back here. Guy bought it in '74 and played it until and it needed a refret. Now, for a guy who is a player, there's a different mindset there, a completely different mindset. He wasn't saying to himself, "Oh my gosh, my vintage, whenever he did the refret." I'm looking at it, I'm gonna assume it was in probably the last 15 years to a decade or so. I was able to clean up real nice. There's still it's 80% there, so that's good enough for me. It's real Japanese, soft, low frets. So it was done in Japan by a Japanese luthier and done very well, by the way. We'll talk about that too. But oh my gosh, I got this guitar. It needs a refret. What damage is it going to do to my value on it? He wasn't thinking like that. He was thinking, this is my guitar, and I want to play the shit out of it some more, so I need to do a refret on it. And those are the two different mindsets between a collector and a player. Collector and a player. Catch up here. IKEA admin, you smart bastard. Well, you asked me easy. Give me a hard one. How high is your IQ? Did you ever get tested? Yes, I did. My brother and I did get tested. My brother's IQ is slightly higher than mine, but neither one of us are going to make it into Mensa. But we both had AP classes, and I went to UCLA when I was in the 10th grade, and so did he. So there's that. But just for morning classes and back to high school in the afternoon. You wouldn't know it though. It didn't make me rich. Stainless steel frets are more common now, Andrew Collins. Mr. Collins, welcome. How you doing? Yeah, I think that there's been a lot of backlash on stainless steel. Yeah, they last for longer, but a lot of players are saying they just don't like to touch the feel, the mojo of them. And also, I have to say that I prefer these old school Japanese frets the way they feel. They're soft. They're soft. And yeah, eventually you're going to do a refret on them, but somehow or another, man, it just feels good. It feels right. Hi from Dubai. Played in neck was what Clapton looked for in the Browning Blackie Strat. Sure, yeah, I wanted this, and it makes a difference. This is the first guitar that I've had that I was working on that Telecaster, but this is the first one that's been played for 51. This is a 51-year-old guitar. So yeah, it's got that played in neck, and that's what makes me love it. I love playing this guitar. When I say I have not put this guitar down, between the work that I was doing on it, doing the setup, working on the frets, I have not put this guitar down since the last time you saw me with it. And I love it. I love it, and yeah, yeah, it's just a good feeling on a played in neck. IKEA says you're the first guy to answer right, and I've been through 100+ streams. Hey man, I appreciate it. Thank you for trying me out. I thank you. Mike, do you have a favorite MLB team? Is California baseball the only baseball? Padres. Yeah, no, I don't. I taught sports. In my last year of high school and in my first year of college in the summer at camp. But outside of keeping up with teams and things like that, I have none. I really don't. San Diego, but I will say San Diego, if it was, it would be San Diego. I always thought that San Diego, yeah, as Mike was saying, are solid. But that would be my answer. So there's that. So there are two different mindsets, and really you have to ask yourself, where do you fall in line with that mindset? Collectors want originality. Untouched, factory condition is king, and that's why I try to buy them as best. That EG 900B that I have sitting in the next room is about as mint as you're going to get for a 1977 guitar, and I bring in a lot. I really that's the hardest part of my job. See, I can find made in Japan guitars all day. I have to find ones that are in great, find those that are in great condition, as well as a price that makes sense for me. So that's the hard part. The idea of original frets being tied to value, which is ridiculous because when Leo Fender designed these guitars, the reason it's got that bolt-on section here is you can take this neck off and put a new one on if you need it. The body is still good, and that was the design idea. But when the vintage, and that's what they were just talking about Clapton. Hell, it was good enough for Clapton. Clapton took the neck off of one and put it on the body of the other for the reasons that were just stated, and now but nobody's going to say to him, well, this is a player's grade guitar now. I'm sorry, it's lost its value. They're not going to say that to Clapton. So really, what's really going on there? Obviously, it's got name value to it as a famous guitar, but still, the principle still is there, is that the neck was meant to be replaced. And all of a sudden, the vintage market came in, yet another, the hand of the vintage market that started, we've been through this around this time in the early 70s with on the West Coast, mostly. And it just kind of grew from there. So when does a refret hurt value? Now, certainly with here, before I go to this next section, let me catch up here. Sorry guys, I gotta restart here. Can you just swap out for a 24 fret or baritone neck? I guess the bolt pattern needs to, it has to match that, then that neck pocket has to match as well. And also, if it has room for, you can do 22 frets. This is 22 frets. I mean, yeah, those would be your two things that you probably get away with it. Yeah, there's enough room in this neck pocket, believe me. Guitars like car stock condition is weight as value. We're going to talk about that. It's so great for you to bring that mic, because we're going to bring that point up in the second part of our discussion tonight. Andrew, are you an amp man or do you like modeling? I myself don't use amps anymore. I retired my Laney. I took over here, I had a nice Laney, the original Cub 12, great amp, 1x12, with a 1972 greenback in it, which is sitting right here in front of me in a box. Took the greenback out, put the original speaker back in it, and the Laney is sitting over here in the corner. Up here on my rack above me is my new analog digital kind of hybrid setup that I use. And um, I'm looking for an all tube amp to put the Laney. That's not an all tube amp. That's a hybrid solid state kind of thing. I'm looking for an all tube 1x12. When I find it, the Laney, I'm sorry, the greenback will go into that one, and I'll keep on trucking. But for right now, I'm very happy. So I'm kind of riding the line between the two, Andrew, to answer that question. So, Holy Grail collectibles like a 59 Les Paul Standard, a 62 Strat, early Martin acoustics. If you do a refret on those, you're going to lose a lot of value. Those are basically what are considered to be museum pieces. And that's the concept. If you refret a collectible, even professionally, the guitar is no longer considered to be original. And then the factor comes in, was it owned by a rock star? There you can get your value back into it again if it's high enough of a rock star. But other than that, it becomes player's grade. See how that's unfair? The guitar was meant to be played. And the guy who had it before me, he played the crap out of this so much that in the time that he did it, he owned it, he had to have a refret on it. And that made this guitar. Well, thank you, Akia. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate the love. Shout out to you, and thank you for subscribing. That's the most important thing, is that you're a member of this great community. We got a lot of cool guys here. A lot of cool guys here. And that's unfair because it made this guitar, the guitar shop in Japan, when they saw that it had a refret, they listed it as D condition, and they sold it for me for less than 200 euros, about 170 euros. Cost me another 80 euros to ship it over here with the VAT. So it's unfair when you consider the fact, of course, that this is a SE600. That means in 1974, when this guitar came out, if you were to take that 600, so that means it was Rokuma yen or 60,000 yen. If you were to take that same 60,000 yen in today's value, that's actually going to come out to about 14,000 yen. And so, in other words, more than double of what this was back in 74. And it would cost that much. It would cost about Jirokuma yen in order to produce a guitar like this these days. And even then, it wouldn't be as good as this. So it's unfair that because this had a refret on it, they basically ditched it when, frankly speaking, this is one of the finest, it's the earliest, but this is one of the finest SEs that I've had. It's it's certainly as heavy as the other ones. It's not the heaviest one. It's not the heaviest one. So that's why I'm kind of happy. I said, well, I've had heavier. That 400 that I had in was heavier. But what was that, 77 or something like that, 76, 77. But it's unfair, I think. The museum piece concept. If you refret a collectible, it's considered to be player's grade. Like I said, it's like replicating the wheels on a vintage toy car or repainting a classic Porsche. Look at it like that. Look at it like that if you want to put it in that kind of analogy. That new Laney Foundry, I'm thinking of getting one. Yeah, Music Companion, I don't know yet. I actually want an orange amp. I want a tube orange amp, 1x12. They got them over in Japan. I'm just looking around for the right one to come on sale for the right price. But once it's player grade, refret is your friend. Yeah, once you got it down to player's grade, then it doesn't matter anymore. And you got it at a good price because they were always 70s Strats. Let me put it this way: 1965 on up. The value of those, I'm sorry, from the 1950s to around 65, the value now of a Stratocaster, the line goes like this. After 65, it begins to drop off. The closer you get to 74, 75, it precipitously drops off in terms of value. You can get, still these days, you can get late 70s Strats for, $1,500, $2,000, Um, because it's just considered to be not that great. And again, that's a little unfair. I think that that's untrue too as well. But once you get one like this that is considered to be a player's grade, then yeah, you could disguise. You're good. Eric Clapton had many refrets on a lot of original guitars. He had a deft grip on the fretboard in the 60s and 70s. Yeah. But famous people can smash the guitars and they become worth more. That is correct. That's the thing. Jesus loves you. Yes, he does. And thank you for reminding me. You will love an orange amp. They sound amazing. Yeah, but I got to find them. I got to find the 1x12 tube. So I got to find it at the right price because I'm cheap. I would take a Greco from the 70s over a Fender from the 70s, better built from the Greco. Yes, I will agree. So a couple of different. So this Greco is modeled after, I think, a 67 to a 71 model because it doesn't have the 3-bolt plate on the back. It doesn't have the micro adjuster. A couple of things on here. It doesn't have the bolt sticking out here at the top. The adjustment is still down here at the bottom, like you would find on 67 through 71. And now people will tell you, that's another point, that people will tell you that the Strats started getting heavy after 74, thus the baseball theory. However, if they were modeling this after 67 through 71 Strat, then they were heavy too during that time. Again, it was a mixed bag. It was a mixed bag. IKEA, what is your opinion on young up-and-coming musicians? And what are your personal experience working with young people? Well, I'm greatly encouraged by young people. And one of the things I'm going to talk about here at the end is going to touch upon that, so stick around. So I'll give a little bit of a preview of that here. In Japan, I'll talk about Japan. Somebody asked me the other day, why is it that, I had a personal trainer come over because I'm starting, now that I've gotten over that operation, I'm starting to feel better. I like to start working out more and maybe gain some of my weight back, but certainly work out more. My personal trainer came over, and when we were done, he wanted to talk about guitars a little bit because he saw some of mine. And he said, why is guitar so big in Japan? I said, because it never stopped. There's always a love for it. There's still venues that you can go to play live at. There's still plenty of busking going on. There's plenty of young people there in Asia in general, not just Japan, who love guitar. Kind of died out in the West because of pop music and the use of synthesizer and rap music in particular. Rap music killed the guitar. But that being said, I'm seeing encouragement in Asia. In Asia, I'm encouraged, and that's good enough. That musical trend's got to move somewhere. It's not always going to stick in the West, so that's good. The Grecos have the bonus of the 4 bolts, yeah. But again, like I said, Seamus, I think that they were designing this after 67 through 71. It wasn't until 72 that they introduced the 3 bolts. So there is that. Indonesian guitars, Indonesia is, I lived in Singapore for 5 years. Spent a lot of time in Indonesia, Singapore. Yeah, at the footsteps of Mount Everest. I never thought that in my life that I would ever be there at Mount Everest and see it with my own eyes, but I did that. And the Maxon pickups are closer to Fender 60 pickups. Yeah, so these are the original, version 1 XLs in here. And they are very low wound. They registered in the 4-point 9. None of them, they're very low winds on these, especially in the neck. Low output, I mean. And so they do have that tone to them. And the neck on this is so pretty. I was playing it, and it's just the bloodiest. I love these XLs. So I'm happy about that, that nobody swiped. The guy who owned this, he didn't take out the pickups. It was good enough for him for 51 years. Okay? It's good enough for me for another 50. There was a guitar called Aria Pro, pretty good. I played 150, and it came with a mini amp. Yeah, I just bought an Aria Pro guitar. Actually, it's sitting in the next room from 1996, made in Japan, however. Exactly, you don't hear the guitar in pop music today. Yeah. So, getting back to refrets and that issue. So, when a refret is totally fine is when you got a $50 Harmony or a Teisco from a pawn shop. Then it doesn't matter because those are inexpensive guitars anyway. Remember, these are guitars that aren't necessarily collectible, but they are tools. A guitar is a tool. Don't get sucked into thinking the way a collector does. Guitars are tools. Used guitars from the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, nobody considers those to be a vintage or any kind of worth like that, so a refret on those seems to be fine as well. However, I'll put a caveat to that. There are certain models, even in them, like some Gibsons that no, even more closer, like Dimebag Darrow type Gibsons, stuff like that. No, you can't do that. Mid-level Japanese guitars, like this one, it's acceptable. Refret can actually improve the value by improving the playability. If the frets are completely gone, it's a worthless guitar. So you got to make that decision. Better to have a functional instrument than a museum piece you can't play, basically, at that point. But there are caveats to all of that. This being a vintage guitar, for sure, this is a true vintage guitar, but it's had a refret on it. Does that devalue this one necessarily? Actually, in the case of this one, no. It actually made the value a little bit stable in the sense that it's a playable, workable guitar. So, actually, in truth, I got a couple of guitars this month. There's somebody working there that's not valuing these things correctly. I got to be honest with you, because they undervalue this greatly, even with a refret. This is not a €170 guitar. This is a 1974 Greco SC600. But because it had that refret on it, it's considered in the most guys who are going through. And I told you, in these Japanese shops, they go through a lot of stuff, and there are rules. And the rule is, if it's a refret, then it's player's grade, even if it's a '70s guitar. And that's just the general mentality. But that mentality may not be the same in Europe or the States on that same guitar. So it's also regional as well, I found. It's also regional as well. Catch up here in the chat. I just recently found out the 1979 Fender Strat anniversary has 4 bolts before Fender moved 100% back to 4 between. Yeah. So it was kind of like, it was like we're going to go back to the way we used to do it. And everybody said, well, that's the way you should be doing it anyway all along. Okay, it's kind of one of those things. Omar, pawn shops really don't have good prices, some more expensive than music. So yeah, because pawn shops are starting to catch on. And the age of pawn shops was back in my day. Back when I was a teenager and even in my 20s and 30s, because there was no internet. There was no, I can quickly go on Reverb and check and see what this is and how much it costs. There was none of that. So the opportunity to get things were a lot better. That's why I said now you have to do your homework. If you have a trained eye, like that Greco that I got in the EG900, they had marked as a 500. I said, this is not a 500. And they made a mistake in that regard that benefited me. But you have to do your homework. So yeah, pawn shops are, even in a pawn shop, you can do your homework and sometimes they'll slip up. Do your homework. What do you think about the Fujigen guitars? Are they possible to refret later during their lifetime? They use a proprietary fret system. Yeah, that's a great question, Walnuts. That's a great, yeah. Like the Tokai. The Tokai. This is made by Matsumoku, and the Tokais are made at Fujigen, and in both cases, because of the radius and things like that, it's not a matter of being more difficult or more expensive. It's a matter of something that you want to have somebody who's experienced doing it. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't try to do it on a bed myself. I would do a refret with a professional luthier that has some experience with vintage guitars. Yeah. So yeah, they're possible. You can refret them later, but you have to have a guy who really knows them, knows how to do that. So my opinion on pleking, on plek, not on Beck, on plek. Well, now that it's been around for a long time, it's it's something that I think if you had a new guitar that's pretty cool with $300 for that service, I think they were charging maybe even upwards of 500. I was reading when it first came out. I don't think there's anything that Fern couldn't do with his tools, the tools and the scopes that he has, that a Plek machine can't. I'm just of that opinion, and it hasn't really changed. Chief Queef, how you doing? Greetings. Yo, love the channel. I need some advice. Does being uncircumcised help or hurt playing serve? Well, you know, it all depends upon what kind of whammy bar you're planning on using there. The machine used to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah, yeah. It's just like CD players and DVD players when they first came. They were super expensive. So in order to pay for that bill on those, they had to charge a lot. Yeah, it's come down in value, but I just think a good luthier like Fern, 65 bucks, and he'll set you right. It'll make it like a new guitar. Plus, he'll tell you things that that Plek machine supposedly can, but just experience. I don't know. Hands over experience, in my opinion. All newer Gibsons are factory plaqued for what that's worth. Well, that adds some value to it. Omar, have you heard of the Millennial Amplifier? Came out in '98. I paid 2,004. It's a great, but now it only goes for 4 or 5. Yeah, that's a shame. Devaluation on amps because again, if you don't have a lot of young people playing, you don't have a lot of people buying guitars. If you don't have a lot of people buying guitars, you don't have a lot of people playing amps. In some clubs will ban amps. They don't like amps anymore, so you have to go digital, and so the value of amps is dropping. It's just the way it is. Seamus, all guitars I listen to are pre-plec and pre-true bypass. Yeah. I mean, I'm not knocking it. I mean, it's a service there, but I just think I'm just believe that a guy like Fern, you know, he if he's and he's cheaper. I can go to Fern a couple of times for the price that I could have something, plucked. Just my opinion. I find highly reputable Japanese shops only deal in 100% original instruments. Very true. Made those by appointment, by recommendation. Yep, my master build is plaqued. Makes no difference to me, but I had to refret it. I know how it left the factory. That helps too. There's a lot of things to that. But if you have a good luthier you took it to, it would be the same thing. He would know as well. Horses for courses in the case of that one. For me, I'm old fashioned. Stevie Ray Vaughan Strat had just covered with stickers. It had a super worn finish. But it had a high value because of player wear and who the player was. The condition ideal becomes down to who played it. Trigger, Willie Nelson's guitar, the thing is held together by like wire and old Ben Gay. It's just solidified and it's holding it together. But that's when when he passes on and that guitar goes to Christie's, it's going to be a multi-million-dollar bid on that. So there's that. And also the authenticity, the authenticness of the wear and tear. I think that a lot of these relic guitars that are new ones are going to be the ones that nobody. It's just you either like that or not. If you got it, you got it. And if you want to sell it on, you better find somebody that wants it because I don't think that those are going to be so great. I think that these truly relic guitars, that's real relicking, that's real over time. Somebody just playing and playing night after night, club after club, that beautiful tint that maple has gotten to. Um, that beautiful, by the way, what they do is they put on these guitars, I noticed that when I was doing the drop fills on this, they put a poly pour fill on this, and then they spray it with nitro, and that basically is what's known as varnishing a guitar, varnish, when you have nitro mixed with something. Then on the headstock, though, you can still see that pure nitro shine, and the way that it gets after 50 years, it gets that ambering. That's another thing too. Is the CV, the custom vibe, they're trying to copy this ambering, but again, theirs is just a little bit too yellow. It's weird, and also ambering like this neck, depending upon how you hold up in the light, this neck can have different colors to it, just like the headstock. See that? You can see now you can see the separation now that I've cleaned it up, and you can see the different colors in there. It's not one uniform amber color. And so that plays a lot into the desirability of a guitar as well. Yeah, it's had a refret on it, but it's cool as shit. So that can add value. So it's a static thing. It's not a set thing. In Japan, the reason why the guy sold this as D is because in his mind, a refret means no good. And with Japanese, that's the way they are. They don't have black and white. They're very Vulcan in their thinking. And that's the reason why I got this for nothing, but for far less than not for nothing, but far less than what its value is. Worth more than that to me personally, because I know that this was owned by somebody who loved this guitar, and I want to be the next person to love it. So it's mine. It's my guitar, for better or worse. Heavy as shit. 9 point. I said I didn't want another heavy pound, another heavy guitar, and yet here I have one. But there's that. Authentic wear. That can drive up the price as well, and make people overlook that refret. So a fret can hurt or help a guitar's value depending upon context. For collectibles, originality matters. For players, function trumps originality. And the final takeaway is know your guitar and know your market. In other words, do your homework. That's you always see how I always circle back to do your homework. Do your homework. But damn it, I forgot. I meant to put this up. I had an image here of a refret that I wanted to use where you can see it here. You get an idea of what it looks like to have it done. And again, you want to have a really good understanding, and also check guitars when you're buying them on Reverb, when you're buying them from folks. Ask, is there a refret on this? Learn to identify what a refret looks like. Know what it looks like. Identify, because you can look at that and say, hey, that's a refret on that, and then make a determination from there whether or not that justifies the value that you're willing to pay for it, or that the person is asking for it as well. So there's that. And that kind of leapfrogs into another thing here that I want to talk about tonight. So that kind of, let me catch up here. IKEA. Did you give your guitar a name or a nickname? I do. The ones that I keep, if I really keep them, I do give them a name. My Telly, my 1992 made in Japan Fender Telecaster was called Monica Butterscotch. I used it on most of my recordings. This one, I was looking at it. It's funny. I was thinking about it. It's got this this heart pattern here. You see that heart? It's got a very distinctive heart there in it. So I'm thinking about that. Thinking about naming it around something like that. It's a very distinctive marking. I'm a player. I don't want a wall piece. Yeah, me too. Recommendations for guitars under $1,000. Yes, certainly, absolutely all. Secondhand, you can get a Gibson Les Paul Studio for under $1,000. It is a Gibson. You can get an American Pro 2 for well under $1,000. Fender. You can get a used American One or V1, for under $1,000. There's a plethora of guitars, secondhand. Secondhand. If you're talking about new, that's a different. You're asking the wrong channel. We're here promoting secondhand guitars. There's enough new guitars out there. There's enough guitars out in the world to give to almost every man, woman, and children. Okay, child. So we need to stop with the overproduction of guitars and start really appreciating vintage guitars. This guitar is 51 years old. Now that I've worked on it and got it back into up to snuff, it'll be good to go for another 50 years. This guitar could go for another 50 years, okay? And so we need to stop it with the over guitar production. Music companion, in the 1990s, I went to a Jaco Pastorius phase and thought defretting my maple fretboard bass and putting ebony wood stain was a great idea at the time. I know what you mean. I know what you're talking about. I was always curious about the fretless. My friend John McKnight, who played on the Fishbone song Party at Ground Zero, the trombone, that's John, multi-instrumentalist. He had a fretless bass. I tried to get along with that thing, but it just didn't work for me. Guitar is older than my dad. Yeah, man. This guitar is 1974. Once I get it open and look at the pots, I could probably get you close to around is it early 74 or later 74. I'm thinking because of the tuners being the old style Greco tuners from the early 70s, it's probably earlier. Probably by mid 74, 75 is when they did the change on the tuners. I'm stupid. I have a Gretsch. I thought I could only down dive, but I'm relieved that I can pull it up also. Yeah. You look like a mature businessman. Thank you. I got 24 fret block inlay Gibson SG 2017 model for 900. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Listen to Mike. Out there, you guys were asking about guitars under 1,000. You can get Gibsons, Fenders all day long for that kind of money these days. You can get a couple, apparently, well, not a couple realistic, but you can get 2 of these SEs for about $1,000, not including shipping and VAT if you have a VAT. I try to look at other things other than guitars because I'm writing scripts like these for live streams. I'm unboxing guitars that I'm importing. I'm working on those guitars that I'm importing, either doing woodwork or electronics. Guitars. And I try to look into other things. Now, I like classic cars. I think if any of you guys can have a read of me by this point, you can tell that I like classic cars. I grew up in Southern California, and so in Los Angeles. So all my life, I had the beauty of seeing some of the best classic cars with my own eyes and riding a few that most people would dream of. So when this year's Pebble Beach Freudian slip. When this year's Pebble Beach car auction came up, I always like to watch it online, see the stuff that's there, and look at those cars. Even on Netflix, like Rust to Restoration, I watch those shows, or American Restoration, car shows, I like to watch those shows because I love the people taking those old cars and giving them new life. Sound familiar? taking old guitars and giving them new life. Well, it's the same thing with cars in me. I like to take old cars and give them new life if I could. In my case, it's guitars. But it's kind of my theme. And I was looking at the Pebble Beach auction this year. It's one of the most premier classic cars events out there. And it was interesting that things didn't quite go as expected. And why is that? What do high-end cars have to do with guitars? Well, I'm going to tie this in. Does India make guitars? Yes. As a matter of fact, I think you're going to see a shift of Epiphone out of China and into India and Indonesia coming up here. Mike, do you have a mathematical equation for determining if traveling for a guitar buy is a good idea? Yeah, I do. I absolutely do. When I took that guitar to the UK to Colin, the guitarista, that he wanted to buy off of me, I had to look at the guitar that he wanted to trade me for, what I thought the value of that guitar was, what the cost of the plane ticket was. It was 56 euros round trip. It was a 1 day trip. I flew there, made the deal, shot the video with Colin, and flew right back that evening back here. But I had to determine all of that. I determined that the VAT and the shipping would have been far more than the cost of buying the airline ticket. So you have to take those things in consideration, if that helps. Would you like to be direct in your own convictions in your personality? I think I'm pretty direct already. 90% of Gibsons made today are not worth 3K or more. Yeah, there is that. Hit 600 shrubs today. Check out his kind. We will do that. We'll always support people. Always support small creators. Absolutely. BC Rich had made in India. They might still do. Yeah, yeah. They've been making guitars in India for a while. It's not. It's not when the big switch goes over to India, which I think is coming. It's not going to be exactly a new market. It's going to be just like the Chinese. They had a little bit of experience in Formosa, or as you know, Taiwan, and that kind of drifted over to the mainland. Great episode of Calling Yourself in mine. But yeah, he's a funny guy. I know a lot of British guys like him, interestingly enough. Now, what happened at this event? Well, high-end boutique cars from the 50s and 60s. Think about 58 Corvette, 59, what am I thinking? Not sort of Porsche, stuff like that. 47 Caddy, things like that. They did not sell. They either barely met their reserve prices or they didn't sell at all. Meanwhile, the cars from the 1990s and the early 2000s, especially the Japanese sports cars and the modern Ferraris, did way better. Why? Because the buyers are changing. You had a group of older guys, Freudian slip again, car collectors, who are out there now. They're in their 70s and their 80s, and they're selling their collections. And they're not finding anybody that's buying them because the price of them are skyrocketed up to the point where very few can afford them. A 59 Porsche that I was talking about is almost $1 million car or more, And the younger generation who has money, they're not interested in those. They're interested in like I said, the Japanese sports cars from back in the day and things of that nature. And when you have a group of older guys who are trying to sell their collections, hoping that there's a new generation that comes along that wants them, they're finding that severely wanting, and they're not able to sell their collections. Kind of see where I'm going with this, guys? I think you're smart enough to see where we can tie this in, but let's continue on. The older crowd that cared about coach-built Italian masterpieces is frankly aging out of the market. And the younger buyers coming in aren't interested in spending $2 million on a car they don't understand or relate to, or they can't even friggin' drive it down the street, because you're not going to drive a $2 million car down the street. You're certainly not going to park it on the corner down the street at the liquor store. It's not going to happen. Instead, they're going after the stuff they grew up seeing on posters. Toyota Supras, Acura NSXs, which, by the way, I love that car. I would love to have that. Porsche 964s. They're nostalgic for their youth, not their dads. Not their dads. That's the key point. Now let's bring this back to guitars. Can we see this in the vintage market world? It's already started. It's already there. It's already started. Let's catch up in the chat here real quick. Don't want to get too far behind here. Would you rather be stranded, the second Buddha, would you rather be stranded on an island with a red Stratocaster or a caramel wood Stratocaster with a whammy bar attached? I'd have to go for the red Strat. I have a Telecaster. How I feel about it if I think it was easy to play. Yeah, you know, you have one guitar. People in the West are spoiled with their guitar collections. In Asia and Japan, and I lived cumulative 18 years in Asia, travel up and down, in and out. Most folks only have one guitar, including myself, at one point. It wasn't until I got to Singapore that changed. The new generation will come. Yep. Mark Myers aging out of value. Yes, exactly. See, you know, Joe Bonamassa will sell his collection because he is smart enough. See, this is how I read the genius of Joe Bonamassa. Everybody always says, well, why does Joe always take, you know, that big rack of guitars with him of his collection with him on the road? You know, certainly you could play replicas or things of that nature, or bring one or two of them, but he brings several of them. Well, the reason is he's going through all of them, playing them live, so that when he does go to sell them, he can say, "This is a stage plate. I played this in Munich in '97, you know, in 2007. I played this one in 2022 in you know, France, you know, blah 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 blah." You can go through his collection and say these are staged, so that puts the value up. And because it's a Joe Bonamassa, there are still people who want to buy them. But I think Joe is going to be in for a little bit of a disappointment too. I don't think there's going to be quite the big, you know, buyers out there. I think it will be an institutional buyer who would take his stuff. It will not be, you know, individuals. It won't happen. It won't happen. You know. What happens to the market for 60,000 pre-CBS Strat when the boomers stop buying? Who's going to pay that kind of money when Gen X or millennials grew up playing made in Japan guitars? 90s PRSs or even early 2000 Epiphones. You know, they didn't play, you know, even 70s Strats. You know, even I had the opportunity to play 70s Strats in the 80s because they weren't vintage then. They were just 70s Strats and nobody wanted them. You could get them for $150, $200. That's no lie in the 80s. Nobody wanted them. You know. And just like those 90 Ferraris at the Pebble Beach auction, some of the best built guitars are now hitting 25 to 30 to 50 to 50 plus years old. And they're way more affordable. The Japanese vintage stuff is far more affordable. This is made to the same specs as a 70s. This is the equivalent of a 70s Strat. The only difference with this, actually, it's better made because the Japanese were making them better. That's just the fact. This is better than a 70s Strat. That's the fact of it. Okay? Only difference, it doesn't say Fender on the headstock. It says Greco. It's the only difference. And if it was so bad, why did the Fender guys fly over to Japan and make the deal with Fujigen to produce the made in Japan Fenders? You know? So let's think about this here. You know, let's think about this here. And millennials are thinking that way. They're not interested in you know, in these $60,000 pre-C. They don't give a shit. Pre-C, what is that? They didn't even know what pre-CBS means. You go up to Alex, my nephew. He's a smart guy. But ask him what a pre-CBS strat is, and he will look at you with a blank look. Unless he's been watching the live stream, pretty much will guarantee. See, my nephews are my gauge for what's going on in that generation, and certainly, yeah, they don't give a shit. That distinction that guys my age may make now, they don't care. The 90s oral by Gibson Les Pauls are built well, they're affordable, and closer in spirit to those guitars to modern collectors, actually, to be honest, than modern. They're closer in spirit to the burst than the modern ones are. The 1990 Fender Japan models are becoming respected, the 1980s and 90s. Even 2000 Tokai and Edwards guitars are getting attention. And the Grecos from the 70s and the early 80s are starting to get appreciated as well. Could this 1974 Greco be the next 89 Porsche 911? Well, it's not impossible. It's not impossible because the price of the qualities, the value, the price of these are such to the point 60,000 or a way lot less. That's your choices. And back to the earlier point, collectible value depends upon context. If the audience for a collectible ages out, so does the value. The value ages out, as was being said here. That's why I think we'll see a shift in what vintage really means and more people buying to play, not store in glass cases. And I think a lot of guys, just like the guys with the vintage car collections who thought, and by the way, because they couldn't meet their value, that means that the value of them have dropped. That means that the same thing happened at Christie's recently. They had a piece of art from 54 from a sculptor that they put on their magazine. It was their big thing. They expect their starting bid was $50 million for this thing, and nobody raised their hand. Nobody bought it. And now that burned that art piece. That's what's called burning an art piece, a piece of art. That means that they can't put it up for sale anytime soon because it didn't meet its minimum. And the same thing is going on with these classic cars. They're not meeting their minimum, so that means that their value, I can go, you wanted $900,000 for that? I'll tell you what, I'll give you $500,000. I'll give you $400,000. It's getting to that point, and with these bursts, 500,000. These bursts are not that 500,000 valuation is only as good as somebody's willing to pay that for it. When that day ends and it is dying out, the cost of those $500,000 bursts is going to drop down a lot less. Not saying it's still going to be in 6 digits, but it's not going to be the high 6 digits. No. And that's going to depend upon provenance. Well, did a rock star own it or not? So that's what I think we'll see. A shift in vintage, what really means coming up here. I just think that's what's coming up here. 89 snat nose Porsche 930 was my favorite car for a long time. It was that NSX I saw living in Japan. I saw so many of them. Oh, I wish I could get one. 90s Gibson equals good quality wood. Yeah. We had the discussion, by the way, Mike. Go into my about good wood. I kind of parody that a little bit on good wood. Take a look at that one in my regular content. My daughter is 10. And I know about music and guitars. Her friends never heard of Stevie Ray Vaughan or the Beatles. All her friends play Minecraft and watch TikTok all day. Can't read or spell. Yeah. Tommy Mac, how you doing, sir? This is a great talk. I was thinking about buying my first semi-vintage Strat, but I keep fine in that I can only afford those with several parts to change for modern components. Yeah, player's great. Anyway, find the least modded out player's grade that you can and buy that one, and you'd be fine. You can always slowly restore it back as well. Find it'd be expensive, but you could do it. 60s and 70s hot rods sold for scrap in the future. Um, you have to have somebody who desires those. It's just a fact. I don't think they're going to be scrap, but I don't think they're going to be what they want for now. Give you a shout out? Sure. You got it. Golden Demons 87. Got a shout out. You got it. Don't know how you get that font. That's a pretty fancy font there you got going there. All right, man. You got a shout out. Welcome. All right, guys. So those are my thoughts, about the vintage guitar. Taking the refret and tying it into really where this is going anyway. And that's why I put a lot of stock in these vintage guitars. Because quite frankly, in my opinion, the Japanese vintage stuff, I think you're going to see creeping up, as time goes on, because it's going to be recognized as affordable vintage quality for people who are looking for vintage. Fender American Series Vintage offer a great value for the money. I agree. So there's that, guys. I don't know if we're going to get to Dave McGowan tonight. Maybe a little bit. Let me see where we're at. All right. Yeah. So we've been talking about at the end. Hey, Nas Queen, welcome. Where are you from, sir? I am from Overtoom in Amsterdam. Tommy Mac, my birthday is June 25th. I may make my purchase before that. I will keep posted. My birthday is June 8th. And so that was the other reason I decided that I was going to just hold this, like keep this for, again, like I said, it didn't cost me much to get it over here, and I'm going to make this my birthday present to myself. So my 58th birthday, I get a 74. It's close enough. I get a 74 Strat. That's all right for me. Well, greetings to you from India, to you in India. Greetings. Laurel Canyon, guys. I'm not going to get into the book too much tonight because we've already set the stage. We've already seen that there's some weird stuff going on. And I haven't even really got to the military base that sits at the top of Laurel Canyon, by the way. And by the way, that military base wasn't just any old kind of military base. It wasn't like, like data, computers or, missiles or anything like that. No, it was actually a film production studio. Full studio, like full Hollywood studio. And it is rumored, if you believe in such a thing, if you say to yourself, well, how is it that a spacecraft made out of tinfoil can make it past the Kuiper asteroid, but the radiation field that exists, the radiation band that exists between us and the moon? How can they survive? So it must not have happened. Well, if you get into that, if you believe that, if you believe they put a man on the moon, someone once wrote, that film footage of the moon landing was actually shot up in Laurel Canyon by Stanley Kubrick. That is the rumor, that Stanley Kubrick shot the moon landing footage. It was all done up there in Laurel Canyon at the military base, which was a film studio, production studio up there at the top of Laurel Canyon. Which is that, obviously, if they're producing film up there, they're producing propaganda, things of that nature. And so that seems very fitting. Very fitting. Now, in contrast to other canyons slicing through the Hollywood Hills, Laurel Canyon has its own market. If you guys ever have been to the Laurel Canyon, it's still there. I've bought soda, at the Laurel Canyon, stopped and bought drinks there. It's still there. It has its own market, the semi-famous Laurel Canyon Country Store. its own deli and cleaners, its own elementary school, the Wonderland School, which, if you guys are familiar with the Wonderland mortars, you guys will know about that. Its own boutique shops and salons, and in more recent years, its own celebrity rehab facility named, as you might guess it, the Wonderland Center. During its heyday, the Canyon even had its own management company called the Lookout Management to handle the talent. At one time, it even had its own newspaper. Where the moon landing was actually shot. Yeah. Happy birthday, sir. Say much love. I'm going to be 48. Yeah, I'll be 58. Tommy Mac, I suggest a special live from Mike's on your birthday. Yeah, maybe we might do that. Army M, yeah. 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 Yeah, I heard about that one. So, you know, it's quite a place. If you guys have ever experienced it, if you go to LA and you got to rent a car, just drive up there. Take it on drive. What you do is you'll go, in my case, I would come up from my parents' house up La Brea, all the way up to Sunset, turn left on Sunset, then you get down a little ways there, and then you turn past Coldwater Canyon to Laurel Canyon, go up. And one other thing that I should add here, David says, is that this has not been an easy line of research for me to conduct, primarily because I've been, for as long as I can remember, a huge fan of 60s music and culture. Though I didn't come of age, so to speak, until the 1970s, like me, I've always felt as though I was cheated by being denied the opportunity to experience firsthand the era that I was so obviously meant to inhabit. I don't know if about that for me, but I have respect for it. During my high school and college years, when my peers were mostly into corporate rock like Journey, Foreigner, Kansas, Boston, and probably worse yet, the twin horrors of new wave and disco music, and me and him are the same age. Same thing. I was faithfully spinning my Hendrix, Joplin, and Doors albums, which I still have in its original vinyl versions, while my color organ, remember those? Yes. Yeah, color organ. Everybody else had a color organ. I grew my hair long. I did that too. There's a picture of me with my hair down here, down on my shoulders. But maybe it's possible I'm confusing my life with that of Greg Brady, which we once all remember once converted his dad's home office into a groovy bachelor pad. One of the most difficult aspects of writing this book has been watching so many of my formal idols and mentors fall by the wayside, as it's become increasingly clear to me that people who I once thought were the good guys were in reality something entirely different. Let that sink in. The first to fall, naturally enough, were the establishment figures, the politicians who I once quite foolishly looked up to as people who were fighting the good fight. They weren't. It pains me to admit this. There was a time when he admired, people like Jerry Brown and Bill Clinton. And by the way, we're going to talk about Governor Jerry Brown because his involvement in Laurel Canyon is very deep. He was a longtime resident of Laurel Canyon. As a matter of fact, he lived down the street, not too many doors down from 8763 Wonderland Avenue, the site of the Ford on the Floor murders. Regarded by grizzled LA homicide detectives as the most bloody and brutal multiple murders ever in the city's bloody history, that had a porn star involved in it, a guy who had a certain girth to him, Mr. John Holmes. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So, just a little bit, I'm going to read that. I'm just trying to make this a little darker as we go down this road this summer. I think that's the overall theme of this, is that it pained him as much as it pained me, and it pains you to hear that people and the idols, and maybe some of these folks were not on the up and up. Maybe some of these folks were quite kind of actually really super nefarious. So, we're going to go down this dark path. It gets dark, guys. It gets twisted. But I do think going down rabbit holes have their pluses to them. And other than talk about guitars, I'd like to talk about the music business as well. So this is talking about the music business, and to see that things aren't always as they appear. So that's as much as I think we've gone about as long as we're going to go tonight. Let me check and see if there's anything else here I can answer in the live stream. Walnut's a pleasure. Can buying a new guitar reignite my passion for playing? Depends upon the guitar. I fell out of love with guitars for years. I fell in love with Les Pauls until I got my hands on one recently. But this heavy ass 970 Strat, like I said, I haven't been able. That's been a long time since I've been sitting there. I got it set up. Once I did all the work and it was done. I have played this continuously. It's been in my hands almost the entire day today for sure. Yesterday for sure. So yes, a guitar, absolutely. It's got a mojo to it. This one's got a mojo. I hope, I hope there's no voodoo spells on it. Why I can't let it go? It's like I'm gonna wake up in the morning in bed with it. Oh man. So yeah, inspire you. It really comes down to the guitar, the instrument. It's you gotta find something to connect, which is that's on you. I pray and hope that you do find that. I found a few. This is a recent one. I'm a catch and release kind of guy, but it seems like that's not going to be the case with this one. I got 2 Strats now. I didn't have any before. Now all of a sudden I have 2 Strats as my main guitars. Go figure. All right, guys. Thank you. As always, I want to thank everybody for showing up in the live stream, participating in it. For the super chat, thank you so much, IKEA men. I really do appreciate that. That means a lot to me. I don't get those very often, and when I do, they mean a lot. I will talk to you guys this Wednesday. We'll have some stuff coming up here. I want to thank each and every one of you. Leave a comment down below if you're watching this in the rerun. Until the next one, you guys take care. Oyasumi nasai, ohai gozaimasu, or huri middle dog, depending upon where you are. You guys take care. Bye-bye.